order to do that, Mike Holmans Wise and I published what we call a SPINET model, a spatial pitch network, where you take in input streams of sound, and what you get out of this is a spatial representation of the sound spectrum, which then goes through what's often called a harmonic sieve to activate pitch categories. So this harmonic sieve, the claim is there because of the way in which the peripheral auditory system activates harmonics with respect to sound. And what we're going to be talking about is that this is sort of like competitive learning or a self-organizing map. Well, why did we build this model? Why did we build a spatial pitch map? And that's because that enables you to embed it in a richer model to understand how we can pick out coherent and auditory streams. But why should you believe the model? Well, the reason you believe any model, it explains at least as much data as any other model that I'm aware of. And I can't teach you that today, but this is a typical simulation, the data, the model, and how pitch shifts with component shifts. But there are a lot of quantitative work, so you can check out the article in the Journal of the Acoustic Society. But why do I think that art is relevant even to auditory and speech issues? Well, that's because art screams out to me from the data, and that's how I got into it. So let me just give you an example that's illustrative, the auditory continuity illusion. So in this illusion, let's say there's a tone followed by a brief interval of broadband noise, so this is frequency against time, and then the tone resumes. And under the right spatial temporal conditions, subjects will hear the tone continue through the noise, and the noise will break off into a distinguishable stream. In contrast, if you just had the tone and the noise, you just hear the tone and the noise. Or if you just had tone, silence, tone, you'd hear tone, silence, tone. So the first paradox you can see by comparing these two pictures, because it makes it look like the brain is operating backwards in time. So how does a future tone let the past sound continue through the noise? Doesn't that mean that the brain is somehow waiting for the future to happen, and that, you know, if there was a non-existent sound here, it'd say, okay, you can not go through now, but if there's a sound in the future, say, oh, you better hurry up and go through. I mean, it's sort of ridiculous if you think about it that way. But if you think about the fact that it takes a while for the resonance to enter consciousness, and that it takes longer for the resonance to enter consciousness than it does for the second tone to reactivate the resonance, then you can see that all of your experience is just lagging in time. And this is just a manifestation of that. And there are quite a few people who have discussed this in philosophy. And what about the comparison between the noise and noise-free cases? Well, that's just the art matching rule. The claim is that if you don't have the noise, by the art matching rule, you can't create something out of nothing, okay? But if you do have the noise in that frequency band, you can select. So this is just resonance and art matching rule, screaming out, use art, use art. So the claim is then that we can build an art stream model, work that I did with Krishna Govindaraj, John Monswise, and Mike Cohn, where we take the SPINET pitch model, which here's the frequency spectrum, and then we just have bottom-up harmonic filtering into the pitch stream, and now we just have redundant gradients of cells here. So the frequency is just extended across in a frequency band. The pitches are just extended across imputed pitch bands. And instead of just the bottom-up filtering, we also have top-down art matching. And so the intuitive idea here is that the harmonic sieve is just going to be learned, as is top-down harmonic matching, just by art learning, and that the pitch categories and the spectra are just the usual arc kind of thing. So if you activate a pitch category in the first stream and you read out its corresponding harmonic seed, that's going to pick out the harmonics that correspond to that pitch. Because of the way inhibition is organized across here, it's going to prevent those harmonics from entering other streams, so you're going to get exclusive allocation. And what the model shows is how each of these resonances can pick up their combinations of harmonics that correspond to that stream. So the claim is, in a word, is a stream is a spectral pitch resonance, and the resonance gives you the coherence to carry the stream over noise. So here's a simple simulation of the main feature of the auditory continuity illusion, tone, silence, tone. It's broken into one stream, and you see the break. On the other hand, if you have tone, noise tone, the tone continues through the noise, and then the rest of the noise is allocated to a second stream. And we've simulated quite a few data with this model. For example, here data of Steiger. If you have frequency ramps that split, you go up in frequency and then you go up and down, down and up, etc. Whether you do it without noise or with noise, you break into two streams. And let me just show you a simulation. This is just sort of an existence proof. A lot more work has to be done in this area. Here's the first stream that automatically broke off from the second stream. And by the arc matching rule, here you have it in noise. The first stream, it continues through, and it breaks off in the second stream. So we've been able to simulate quite a bit of data here, but this is certainly not complete here, and I encourage you to consider it. But the reason I mention that data is because when you jump up into the speech domain, then you see a very similar thing. And here, to me, I love the example of phonemic restoration, in which, let's say you have a broadband noise, followed quickly by the sounds, eel was on the. If you end the sentence with axle, under the right spatial temporal conditions, instead of hearing noise, you'll hear wheel was on the axle, shoe, heel was on the shoe, orange, peel was on the orange table, meal was on the table. All data due to Warren et al. And this shows that, again, the future, this last word, which is the only thing different, somehow feeds back to the past. And that meaning, the meaning of the whole sentence has to be grouped in some bottom-up way before you can read out some kind of matching law to pick out the formants that are consistent with the meaning. That looks like the arc matching rule, and in fact, if you just put silence here, as Art Samuel and others did, then if you heard eel was on the shoe, you'd say, that's disgusting, get it off. In other words, it's not just a symbolic thing. You're really linking a new meaning to the phonetics. And I'd also show if you just put in certain formants here, you tend to hear the projection onto the formants that are there of the expectation of that sentence. So this is again saying arc matching rule, but it's also saying resonance, because we don't hear the noise in noise yield under the right conditions. So bottom-up activation, just purely feed-forward processing, is not the conscious speech percept. Rather, bottom-up and top-down activations combine on a slow time scale, a time scale that takes long enough to evolve so this last word can get fit in if it's said quickly enough, in order to generate the conscious speech code, which I claim is the resonance. So let me just give you one example, very lightly, of how resonance can explain speech data. Some work that I did with Ian Bortman and Mike Cohn that appeared in JEPHPP several years ago. And this has to do with a kind of speech categorization data, data here of Bruno Rep, but there are a number of other investigators. And what Bruno did was very simple. He just took a vowel consonant, consonant vowel pair. He varied the silence interval between them. And then he asked, when can you hear two distinct consonants two distinct syllables as opposed to just one continuous syllable like digga? And not surprisingly, if you just look at the silence interval and plot against it the probability of hearing these two stops, as you increase the silence interval, the probability goes up and up and up. So that's no big deal. But then what Bruno did was he replaced the g by another b, and he asked, when do you hear two distinct syllables, ib versus iba? And here again, as you increase silence interval, the probability goes up and up and up. But what's remarkable about the data is that the curves have shifted. And the curves have shifted by 150 milliseconds. And 150 milliseconds is a huge amount of time relevant to the time scale of neurons, which is always a magnitude faster. So the question is, why did those curves shift? And this gets into a whole series of issues about working memory and what have you. Yesterday, I gave you a little review of working memory concerning how a temporal speech signal is transformed into an evolving spatial pattern of activation in working memory. And I propose one helpful heuristic is what I call the long-term memory invariance principle, namely the law for storing items in short-term working memory should enable sequences of stored items to be stably categorized or chunked in long-term memory. And I talked about, suppose you knew the words myself and elf, and you're trying to learn a new word that includes these syllables. You want to be able to do it without forcing forgetting of what you already know about these shorter words. And I remarked that that helps you to explain a lot of data about primacy, recency, and Bowen gradients in short-term memory. And I claim that it's realized by a recurrent or feedback onset of surround shunting net. So we're going to need to use those working memories here. There's another principle, though, which is equally important, I believe, about how you actually categorize or chunk lists. And this issue is, how can an unfamiliar sequence of familiar speech events be unitized in an unsupervised learning setting? So kids learn language often just by hearing it. People don't have to teach it to them word by word. And this is a very fundamental problem because the question is, why is not an unfamiliar sequence with no representation always represented as a sequence of its familiar parts? So if I hear my and self and I know my and self, then why aren't I forced to always break up myself as these separate words? Or by just reducing it to the limit, why aren't I forced to hear everything in terms of a sequence of phonemes? So how do you get around this? And Mike Cohn and I worked on a network we call the masking field, which claims that you have multiple scales of chunking, and the bigger chunks have more weight than the smaller chunks. So they have an a priori ability to try to fight against the salience of the smaller chunks. And you need this sort of thing. And I claim that this is, again, a feedback on central surround shunting net. But it's a multiple scale net that has a self-similarity property. Unfortunately, I won't be able to go over that with you today. But the claim is that just as in streaming, I claim there are spectral pitch resonances. Here, I would claim there are item chunk resonances. So again, there are resonances, I claim, but at a different level of the system. So as items are coming in here, they're getting stored as an evolving spatial pattern in working memory. They're going again through an adaptive filter. They're activating this multiple scale self-similar chunking net, where the most predictive chunks are trying to win the competition. those chunks are starting to read out their expectations to pull out the combinations of features consistent with them, to start resonating on them and coming into consciousness. So that heuristically, the intuitive idea here is that suppose all I had was something like a book. If I didn't have the top-down feedback, the book wouldn't exceed a resonance threshold, so you wouldn't be consciously aware of it. But with that feedback, it's going to exceed a resonance threshold and you're going to hear it. However, if you follow the book by a G, the claim is that you're going to have competitive inhibition here, a reset event. So the G inhibits the book before it can get to resonate, so you only hear the G. What happens in the IB case? Well, the first book, remember I said in the auditory continuity illusion, it takes a while to resonate. And so the buzz starts to resonate, but it takes a while. Things are delayed in time. But the second buzz, all it has to do is keep you in resonance. So that can go real fast. So you can have fusion of the two buzz to give you IBA over a long interval. In fact, I have to emphasize, I just skipped over the main point given here, that what's, to me, really exciting isn't just the shift, but the fact that here, where all you've done is change good above, in this situation, where you're hearing a single syllable with very high probability, for this situation, you're hearing two syllables with very high probability, just by changing context. Okay. So that I suggest, oh, I'm in the middle of that one, sorry, I mean, wait, oh, where did it go? Where did that slide go? This is the first. The case of the vanishing transparency. I do need this picture. It just got misplaced in here. Okay, so the point is that you can get the resonant fusion over this longer interval because all you have to do was to refresh the resonance. But that then raises the issue of if you don't have something competing with the bow, why does it ever shut off? And so the claim here is that in addition to this fast processing, there's a medium-term memory going on. In fact, this medium-term memory was also implicitly mentioned when we were talking about art reset, how you drive the memory search. The idea is you have activity-dependent transmitters gating the bottom-up and top-down pathways, and these are desensitized in an activity-dependent way, so that when you resonate on the book, its transmitters just get tired out and they crash. And then they recover, and then they come back again. In fact, if you heard Sir's talk yesterday on visual cortex, I claimed that these obey the very same laws for audition that he was seeing in his shift properties in vision. And we'll see more about that tomorrow. So that, in summary, these data indicate what I mean when I say that conscious speech is a resonant wave, that it's only when things get above the resonance threshold that we may hear them, and that silence is really quite a dynamic thing. It's a discontinuity in the rate with which the wave evolves, that it's not just a fixed node like Ellman and McClellan might claim in the trace model. Rather, it's a property of the rate with which a resonance emerges. Finally, these considerations indicate there are at least two mechanisms of resonance reset. One is mismatch reset. That's, for example, the way the G could inhibit the B. And the other is the habituative collapse. That's where, just due to the resonance itself, it gets tired out due to activity-dependent habituation. So this simple version of the model, you just have your items in working memory, you have your list chunks, you also have a gain control that speeds or slows the integration process to give you invariant properties. But I'm not going to talk about that today. Rather, let me just show you, let's say you have a bottom-up activation of an item, it would have crashed, but then it gets top-down support, it starts to resonate. As it resonates, its habituative transmitters start to decay. That causes the resonance to crash. And when it crashes, the transmitters can recover, and the system is ready to go again. And using these simple ideas, then you can quantitatively fit the data of Bruno Rep. Now, there are a lot more things I could say about speech, but let me just summarize this part of the talk by emphasizing the claim that a resonance code for conscious speech includes the idea that conscious speech is a resonant wave, and that resonance selects working memory items that are consistent with top-down expectations, and it develops on a slower time scale than just purely feed-forward processing. This is a very different approach to speech understanding than present HMMs. It's harder to realize, but I think that there's quite a big payoff. So in summary, I want to emphasize that I'm not claiming that art can ever hope to explain everything. There is no theory of everything. In particular, when we ask why aren't procedural memories conscious, so things like motor memory, the claim is that their matching and learning laws are not resonant. Okay, so we've been talking so far about sensory and cognitive matches. So where here, if you have a match, like I say, look for something, and if it's there, you get an excitatory match. Okay, then the match amplifies activity. And in fact, we have a kind of match learning. If you have a good enough match, then you learn, and only then. On the other hand, as we'll see on Saturday, when you get into motor control, you have a different, unique, complementary type of matching and learning. Because there, very often, what you're matching is target position. So let's say I want to touch the overhead projector. And what you're often matching it against is present position, or where my hand is now. And when I have a match, my hand is where I want it to be. So what would happen? Well, nothing. I've already done it. So the idea is that your goal excites a difference vector, and your present position inhibits the difference vector. So you have a suppression going on during matching. When there's no difference, you shut down. And the claim is here you have mismatch learning. So amplified matches, suppressed matches, match learning, mismatch learning, the claim is they're complementary, and they have very, very different properties. So the claim is that in the where stream, you're often going to get mismatch learning, and we'll see examples of that on Saturday. In the what stream, you'll often see match learning. And the reason for that, I would claim, well, one of the reasons, of course, with such sweeping generalizations, you have to be careful, that in the what stream, you want to have fast learning without catastrophic forgetting, and these excitatory arc-like matches can get it for you. But in the where stream, you want to have spatial and modal learning. And I don't want to remember my motor commands or spatial maps from when I was a 5-month-old baby. I want to have the maps that work for me this minute. So I want to forget all that stuff, and this mismatch learning is really well suited for that. So the idea is in the where stream, where you're doing this kind of learning, catastrophic forgetting is good, so that you can continually update your sensory motor maps and gains. So we seem to have a perceptual and cognitive front end that's self-stabilizing, And that is used in order to control motor gains in maps that are more catastrophically forgetting. So if I had to say, is there a link between brain learning, attention, and consciousness, I would claim it's brain resonance, and that I'd like to still advance the notion that all conscious states are resonant states, and if you know a contradiction with that claim, I would certainly want to hear it. Okay, I'm really sorry about the Gedanken experiment. I don't think it's going to happen today. I have my heart set on it. But I also today want to go on to another topic that I think is also interesting and worthwhile, and that has to do with neural models of normal and abnormal cognitive emotional interactions. This is again a huge subject, and I'll just be able to go over it lightly, everything I'm discussing here, because I realize we could talk about at great length. So in this part of the talk, I'll be talking about reinforcement learning and how it's related to recognition learning. And in order to frame the discussion, I'll start with some abnormal cognitive emotional interactions to highlight some key properties. So I'm going to start with a really hard topic, the topic of schizophrenia. And it's known that in schizophrenia you have loss of attentional control, motivational defects, and disorganized behavior. In fact, Kraepelin in his early work on schizophrenia wrote as follows: "This behavior is without doubt clearly related to the disorder of attention, which we very frequently find conspicuously developed in our patients. It's quite common for them to lose both inclination and ability on their own initiative to keep their attention fixed for any length of time." So there have been a lot of efforts to classify schizophrenic symptoms over the years, notably into negative and positive symptoms, otherwise called deficit and non-deficit symptoms. And Little, among others, has tried to give such classification, and he does it in terms of psychomotor poverty, disorganization, and reality distortion. For what psychomotor poverty? Here you have flat affect, poverty of speech, decreased spontaneous movement. Disorganization includes inappropriate affect and disorders of the form of thought. And reality distortion includes the familiar delusions and hallucinations. Today I'd like to discuss the first two most, but think about, for example, what could go wrong in an art model to make it hallucinate. Little in particular suggested that two of these syndromes reflect volitional disorder, namely that psychomotor poverty reflects a difficulty in initiating activity, and disorganization reflects a difficulty in the selection of appropriate activity. And both are associated with problems in the frontal lobes. There's another line of thinking about schizophrenia, greatly amplified by Chris Fritt in England, talking about schizophrenic impairments in theory of mind. And that includes the ability to represent beliefs and intentions. So a paradigmatic example is that photos of people are described physically rather than in terms of mental states and feelings. But Christopher himself admits that theory of mind, and I quote him, does not explain the other major feature of schizophrenia, their impoverishment of will. Well, with this brief introduction to schizophrenia, it leads us to ask how are brain mechanisms of attention, affect, and volition relate? Because that's what all these symptoms are telling us, that they can all go wrong together. Okay. Well, the importance of attentional deficits during schizophrenia is consistent with the fact that it's well known that there's attentional modulation of learning. In particular, animals and humans learn to attend to the most reliable and non-redundant stimuli in their environments. And attention is controlled by at least two systems. One is sensory and cognitive expectations. That's the kind of cognitive art-like stuff we just discussed. Another, which I'm about to tell you more about, are emotional and motivational expectations, where learned feedback between cognitive representations occurs and reward and punishment centers. So, we're led to consider neural models of normal learning during cognition and cognitive emotional interactions. And in fact, I think it's crucially important to know what the normal mechanisms are to show then how clinical symptoms can arise when these mechanisms break down. And I'll focus on how modulatory arousal and volitional signals can become balanced in the normal circles. And because these are modulatory, balancing kind of things, I think that helps to explain why clinical symptoms are so subtle. You know, things just get a little out of whack. It's a miracle we're not all more unbalanced. Well, let me start with a provocative question. What do schizophrenia, Parkinsonism, attention deficit disorder, and depression all have in common? And I claim that they at least have in common a shared type of opponent processing circuit whose net arousal level may be too large or too small in different sorts of circuits. So what do I mean by that? Well, in such opponent processing circuits, which I'll tell you about more, when you parametrically vary arousal and you measure indices of behavior, there's an inverted U, and the golden mean is at intermediate levels of arousal. On the other hand, if you're under-aroused, there's going to be one kind of depression, which I call under-aroused depression. Here, because there's too little arousal, not surprisingly, you have an elevated behavioral threshold. But much more surprising, if you exceed that elevated threshold, you get hyperexcitability above threshold. It's a kind of Weber law property, again, that I'll tell you about. Usually you would expect to be hypoexcitable. And if you're over-aroused, well, sure you have a low threshold, but here again, it's something paradoxical that happens. Of course, here you're going to be hypoexcitable above threshold, so you just never get off the ground here. And why this is paradoxical is because if you have a pharmacological up like Ritalin, so it can bring you from here to here, and it's going to bring your excitability down. So how does that happen? Well, to better understand that, why don't we consider the simplest kind of cognitive emotional learning? And here I'll consider classical conditioning. You might say, oh my God, that's so simple. How can that explain anything important? But I'll try to indicate in a moment that it really brings up fundamental issues. So in classical conditioning, you pair, for example, a bell with shock until the bell by itself can make you feel fear. So you have the CS, the conditioned stimulus like a bell, turn it on. A little while later, you turn on the shock. The shock causes you in an unconditioned way, so it's the unconditioned stimulus, have an unconditioned response of fear. And then by pairing the CS with the US, eventually the CS can also elicit conditioned fear. So it's a very simple example of associative learning. Okay. Well, there are several properties of classical conditioning that are real important. The first is called the interstimulus interval effect, where the ISI is the interval between CS and US onset. And here again we have an inverted U, that as you parametrically vary the ISI and look at the strength of the conditioned response, you get an inverted U. So there's some optimal positive ISI where learning is more efficient. Well, it's sort of obvious if the ISI is huge, why you don't get learning. If I ring a bell today and I shock you in 2 weeks, big deal. On the other hand, if I pair a bell and shock simultaneously, you might say, well, those are maximally correlated. So why is learning hurt here? Okay. Here, just to illustrate the kind of data, this is some data showing you this inverted view. The second feature you need to consider to even get off the ground is secondary conditioning, which runs a multi-billion-dollar advertising industry. Namely, you have one CS1, you pair it, let's say, with shock, until you're afraid of that CS1. Or you might be pairing, though, an automobile with a beautiful person, get them sexually aroused by driving a car. And then, when you're getting scared of the CS1, you get another CS, and you pair it with the condition reinforcer, and it also can become a condition reinforcer. So you can do a kind of chaining here from one CS to another CS. But what we're interested in is how a classical conditioning and tension related. And what this has to do with is what's called attentional blocking. And this shows in a way that humans and animals are minimal adaptive predictors. And here's where classical conditioning becomes more interesting. Because let's say I again pair, let's say the bell with a shock until I'm afraid of the bell. But now take the bell and simultaneously present it with an equally salient meaning perceptually salient, light, say. And now when you pair these two with the shock, the light is not going to elicit a lot of fear. And the intuitive idea is the light isn't eliciting a lot of fear because it's predictably irrelevant. The bell is already predicting everything you need to know about the situation, a certain shock level at a certain time. The light adds nothing new, and so it's blocked. So that's what I mean by saying that we're minimally adaptive predictors, and what it says is that each of us can go through life with our own set of cues that we use to predict consequences, just so long as they do a good job in predicting them. Well, the claim is that if you can explain the ISI effect, and if you can explain secondary conditioning, then you can also explain attentional blocking. And the way to see that is just look at the paradigms. Here's the blocking paradigm, here's the zero ISI thing. In the zero ISI thing, you say if you have a simultaneous CS and US, then you don't get conditioning of the CS. Well, in the blocking thing, you first have conditioning of CS1 coming before the US, and then you have CS2 simultaneous with US, and you say that CS2 doesn't get conditioned, it's blocked. But this is the same as that. It's just you have a secondary conditioning. Okay. So if I can explain the ISI effect, and if I can explain secondary conditioning, then I've also explained blocking. But we also have to understand unblocking. So in blocking, you have the same shock intensity in both phases of learning. But what would happen if I, let's say, quadrupled the shock, or cut it in half, or shut it off entirely? Well, if I greatly increase the shock when I put the light on too, then the light can condition. In fact, you can get really scared of the shock because it's predicting an increase in shock. On the other hand, if you shut the shock off here, then you could also condition the light because it's predicting a removal of shock. So you can have a huge relief rebound. And so this is showing that there's a very active kind of monitoring going on. What does it say? We're paying attention to relevant cues. So the bell predicted the first US. But unexpected consequences redefine the set of relevant cues. So doubling the shock now makes a new cue relevant. Moreover, these unexpected consequences or novelty feed back in time. They have to do it using a non-specific way because you don't know what caused the problem. And that redefines this set of relevant cues. Well, that sounds just like art. And this is how art was derived in 1973, 74. Through a study of cognitive emotional learning, it became clear that to explain attentional unblocking, you needed these heuristics. Okay. And moreover, we need to distinguish novelty per se from emotional sign, because if you increase or decrease the shock level, okay, you're going to have novelty in both cases, but you can get an opposite emotional outcome. And this is how art actually came into view. Well, I can't derive for you this model today from first principles. There's a thought experiment whereby you can derive this model too. But the minimal version of it has 3 types of representations and learning. There are sensory representations. This we already know about. We'll have recurrent shunting on center off surround nets, which are competing for attention and working memory. There's also going to be readout of motor learning, which we'll talk about on Saturday. But today we have to focus on the third kind of representation, which I like to call a drive representation. So what is a drive representation? So these are sites where reinforcement and homeostatic inputs interact to generate emotional and motivational output signals. So people like Gordon Bowell like calling them emotion nodes. People like Andy Bartle and Sutton et al. Like calling them adaptive critic elements. They have a long history. In neuroscience, you find analogs of them even in crustacea, where they're called facilitator neurons. In mammals, they include the amygdala. So what we have here are the sensory and drive representations interacting to control 2 kinds of learning. Conditioned reinforcer learning, by pairing a CS with a US, the CS can activate these emotional centers. Likewise, by pairing the CS with a US, you can get the reverse learning, which I call incentivization learning to honor a long stream of scientists, whereby a certain state of emotion or motivation can prime the sensory and cognitive representations to look for events that can satisfy that need. So you have conditioned reinforcer learning, incentive motivational learning, and motor learning. And in fact, this kind of circuit exists already in invertebrates, in ecclesia. Here is work from Burns' lab. You have the CSs come in, you have your recurrent on-center off surround net, you have your drive representation, which gives you positive feedback. It's called a facilitator neuron. Well, you might immediately ask, why should similar circuits exist in mammals and invertebrates? Why is this such an ancient discovery? And I claim it's because both solve similar environmental problems. And in fact, in the Gedanken experiment that I wish I could do for you today, but I can't, you can derive such circuits from 2 simple principles. One principle I call the synchronization problem, which just says, how can you learn to do classical conditioning if you vary the time interval between the CSs? Just the most obvious thing in the world. You know, you vary the delay, you can still learn over a wide range. That creates a crisis if you think about it in real time. And the second is what I call persistence problems. Namely, what happens if you're processing simultaneously a whole series of cues that have emotional meaning? So I like this obscene example where I talk about going to dinner with your lover, and let's say I look at my lover and I think, we're going to have wonderful sex tonight. And then I look at the food on Thanksgiving, I look at the turkey, and I say, I'm going to eat. Well, why don't you end up eating your lover and having sex with turkey after every dinner? And I say this because it's gross and in our life, power, food, sex, these are the things we remember about. But when you can say something so ridiculous, you realize how basic it is, and it was this problem that killed off classical connectionism, this short circuit problem. Well, the circuit I just showed you solves the problem. And if you haven't an idea where the amygdala is, here it is. And for good reason, it's near areas like the basal ganglia and areas like the hippocampus. Okay, so the claim is that a conditioned stimulus becomes a condition reinforcer by learning to activate a strong reinforcer motivational feedback path. So by pairing the CS with the US, I strengthen the ability to activate an emotional response, and I strengthen the ability of a feeling state to prime my sensory and cognitive representations. Okay. So how then could you explain blocking in this context? Well, the three facts are important. The first is that sensory representations compete for a limited capacity short-term memory. Remember, yesterday I proved to you that you get total activity normalization and shunting feedback net. So now previously reinforced cues, let's say CS1, are going to amplify their own short-term memory via positive feedback with their drive representation. Okay? So they're going to grab some of these working memory resources. That's going to shut down by normalization other cues, and those cues won't be able to sample the drive representations. They're going to be blocked. So let me show you that a little more precisely. So let's say the CS turns on, and let's say that all you had was the CS gets activated and it gets stored for a while before it fades out. But let's say it's a condition reinforcer. So a condition reinforcer will take a little while to activate its loop, and it'll have the same initial response, but then it'll be amplified. Okay. Well, how does that explain blocking? If these two cues turn on simultaneously, their activities will both start to grow, but then the condition reinforcer will be amplified, and through competition, the other cues will be suppressed. And we've seen, I showed you some data before, this kind of thing, they both start out the same, one gets boosted, the other crashes. We have a lot of neuroscience data that she looks like this today. So that would explain blocking, but then how do you explain how you ever learn when you have a positive ISI? And here the claim is you really have to think in real time. The point is the CS will occur before the US. So its representation will be fully active before the US ever starts. And moreover, it'll be trying to inhibit a cortical representation of the US if one exists. So it's going to take a while for the US to get active and to shut down the CS, which it will. And it's during this interval that the CS can look down at the drive representation and start to learn a cognitive emotional association. And so using such a model, Dan Levine and I, Dan's here in the audience today, I believe, simulated this inverted view with respect to the ISI. And we also simulated emotional conditioning and blocking. So let me just give you a feel for it. So here's just the CS1 short-term memory trace. Over learning trials, it gets bigger and bigger because it's getting more and more motivational feedback. Here's the US trace. It gets a little knocked down, but it already has a lot of motivational feedback to support it. The drive representation gets activated faster and faster, so you have an anticipatory conditioned response. And this is the adaptive weight here, which has a classical S-shaped curve. But notice that you have passive decay. So this is not the whole story, because you don't have passive decay. And to simulate blocking, first the CS1 comes on, it gets bigger. When you have CS1 and CS2, it stays bigger, but CS2 is greatly attenuated. As a result of that, the trace of CS1 can still be big, but the trace of CS2 is greatly attenuated, so that shows blocking. So this simple scheme gives a unified explanation of blocking, the ISI effect, secondary conditioning, and the anticipatory conditioned response. And also, by thinking about unblocking, you realize you're going to have to somehow link this to cognitive circuits, which I won't be able to do today. But this isn't sufficient in order to explain even the minimum amount of data, because if all you had was feedback between the sensory and the drive representation, then when the sensory representation fired to try to see, am I motivationally important, it could also fire directly to lead to motor outputs, even if it wasn't motivationally important. And that's a disaster, and so there needs to be at least one more stage, and the sensory representation tries to activate that later stage, but it can only do so effectively if it gets incentive motivational feedback. So I have the sensory cue, it's motivationally important, now I can act. And the question is there a precedent for this kind of processing? And here is a schematic from Helen Barbas, who was here yesterday, I don't know if she's here today, where you have a first stage in the sensory cortex, a second stage in prefrontal cortex, and then you have the amygdala as the putative drive representation. And so I would want to claim that what we really have here is a circuit with regions like sensory cortex and prefrontal cortex and amygdala, and here you have conditioned reinforcement, here you have incentive, here you have top-down arc priming, and here you have the convergence of sensory cue with motivational support, so you have emotionally modulated activation of cells that can read out responses. So let's just ask now, let's go down to back to schizophrenia and ask, what happens if the drive representation, such as the amygdala, have a depressed or attenuated response to inputs? Well, even if sensory cues come in here, then the amygdala couldn't get active, and then the prefrontal cortex would be hypoactive, and all this stuff would crash. So what would that do? Well, that would mean that all mental states that depend on interpreting one's own emotional state, as well as the emotional states of others, will be diminished, which can happen with flat affect and the ability to represent others' beliefs and intentions. But in addition, it would cause a collapse of these incentive motivational signals. So the prefrontal representations will not be adequately activated. So you'll have hypofrontality here. And their top-down signals to the early sensory and cognitive stages will be eliminated. Well, if that happens, then the sensory representations will not be able to use the top-down signals to organize their information according to its emotional meaning or motivational goals. That is to say, there's a failure of attentional blocking, so that motivationally irrelevant information will not be adequately blocked. And so you're going to be forced to pay attention to motivationally irrelevant stuff. So there's going to be a real blooming, buzzing confusion there. Okay. So now I want to ask, how can a drive representation get depressed? Moreover, how are drive representations designed? So we've already seen how onset of a shock can be negatively rewarding and can activate a fear state. But it's also true that offset of a shock can be positively rewarding because we can feel a wave of relief. And so if you're trying to design drive representations, you really have to consider opponent processing. So if you pair a CS with a shock to elicit fear, that's one thing you can do. But you can also have primary inhibitory associations where first I turn on the shock, which elicits the fear. Then I shut off the shock and I feel a wave of relief. And then I turn on the CS, and if the CS is timed with this rebound, then the CS can learn that wave of relief. And so each cube can sample both a negative and a positive drive state, and these now are opponents. And we have to consider how this kind of opponent processing is designed. So shock on, you can have fear; shock off, you can have wave or relief. This stuff goes back half a century. You have the same thing in perception. Turn a picture on for a while, shut it off, you get a negative after effect. So opponent processing is ubiquitous in the brain. I've talked about it in classical conditioning, but it also occurs in instrumental conditioning. Let's say I have a pigeon pecking and I'm punishing it now to cause response suppression. If I suddenly reduce the level of shock, that can be a positive reinforcer, even though you're still shocking the poor thing. So let me show you a classical example of that with some data of Reynolds. So you have, let's say, a pigeon pecking on a variable interval schedule, and it has its normative pecking rate. And now for the first 5 trials, there's no shock. Now for the next 5 trials, you turn on a moderate shock, and that causes a certain amount of response suppression. Then give it 5 more unshocked trials, and it'll peck more, get a positive rebound. Now really shock the hell out of it. It'll stop it responding totally, and it gets a bigger positive rebound when you stop the shock. So the offset of a negative event can cause a positive rebound that is calibrated to the strength of the negative event. So how do we design opponent processing to get at these antagonistic rebounds? And I found it helpful for at least 30 years now to use a certain kind of model that I call a gated dipole. And let me just show you some of the nice properties of the dipole, I guess, to end the talk. And here's where we come into medium-term memory or habituative dynamics. And this is occurring all over the place. In particular, this, I believe, is precisely what's going on in Sear's data yesterday. And it's been critical, for example, in models of the self-organization of cortical maps in V1. So it occurs everywhere. Why does it occur everywhere? Well, let's say you wanted to play God and design an unbiased transducer. So you have an input S, you have an output T. Well, what's the simplest way to make something unbiased? Well, just make the output T proportional to S with some proportionality factor. That's the gain or sensitivity. But now suppose that this output is due to the release of a chemical transmitter Y that's at a synapse. Can we convert this unbiased transduction law into a law for transmitter release? Well, yeah, sure. Just replace B by Y so that the rate of transmitter release is proportional to the, let's say, the spiking frequency times the amount of accumulated transmitter. And then what is B here? Well, that means that you try to keep the amount of transmitter accumulated to a target level so you don't lose sensitivity. Well, how could Y, the transmitter, stay at the target level if you're releasing it? Well, it can't be restored instantaneously, so let's write out the simplest differential equation that can express this. So we have to talk about the time rate of change of the transmitter. And first, we want it to accumulate to its target level B. And second, we want it to be released or inactivated by mass action at the rate T. And so this says that the transmitter wants to accumulate to recover to ensure unbiased transduction with good sensitivity. But the question is, what if it falls behind? And I claim that evolution has exploited the good properties that happen when it does fall behind. In fact, some of you, if you know some of Larry Appett's work and Henry Markman's work, Larry had a nice paper in Science in '97, and Henry's had a number of beautiful papers recently with colleagues. one of the key features here, in fact, this is the very equation that Larry derived from his cortical data and confirmed all the properties that had been used for 30 years with this kind of equation. So that's a marker if you're not aware of that. Okay, so there's a minor mathematical miracle here, because if you let this go to equilibrium and set the rate of change equal to 0, well, sure, y decreases when the input increases. You just solve for y. The signal is downstage, bigger signal, smaller y. But the release rate is the mass action interaction of S and y. And that means that the signal goes up as you have a bigger signal. So you still get a bigger signal, but you're depressing more and more. Well, how does that give you nice properties? Well, let's suppose you have an input at a steady level, it shoots up to a higher level, and then it goes down to a lower level. Well, what's going to happen to transmitter? Well, it's going to start high because you had a low signal. It's going to gradually habituate, and it's going to gradually recover. Okay? But the signal, the output, is their product. So if you multiply these curves, you have a constant. If you multiply these, it shoots up. This stays there, but this goes down, so the product goes down. That shoots down, this shoots down. This stays there, the product gradually goes up. So you have overshoot, habituation, undershoot, habituation, and you have a Weber law in time, because you're always weighing the new signal against the habituated level that you accumulated to by the slow variable. So this now helps us to explain how we get antagonistic rebounds, because the claim is that you can put together, well, let me just show you. Let's say I have a phasic input coming into the on channel. Let's say this is like fear. Tries to turn on the on channel, but I'm also going to need a baseline of energy in order to energize the rebound to the off channel. Let's call that arousal. So the phasic input adds on to the arousal. So I have a step on a background, goes through this habituative gate. But what happens then? Well, this happens. So there it is, it happened. Okay. Well, now what is going to happen in the opponent channel? Well, here I just have arousal. I go through the gate. I'm going to have a baseline level of activity here. So all I have is arousal with phasic input, habituative transmitters that are trying to stay unbiased, and now I have an opponent process, so I have competition. So I subtract the baseline from here that shifts it down. I rectify the signal. I get a sustained but habituative on response. In the other channel, I subtract again, but I reverse sign. That means I flip this. So here's what I have when I rectify, I get my off rebound. So all it is a system that's tonically aroused, trying to stay unbiased, has opponent competition and rectification. And the bottom line is that this system has this inverted view. Okay. And let me prove it to you. Okay. And then you'll have to just integrate these thoughts into the relevance to schizophrenia and other stuff, because I have to end in a few minutes. So I want you to get a feeling that this is just algebra, and this is something you can do. But I also want to show you that this is the kind of thing that really catapulted progress in the field, because I'll show you in a moment how this simple exercise forced me into art. Okay? So let's look at the on response to a phasic on input. So I'm just going to have a phasic input in my baseline arousal. My signal in the on channel will have the phasic and tonic input. My signal in the off channel will just have the tonic input. My habituative gates will habituate to S1 and S2 respectively. My output signals will just multiply S1Y1, S2Y2. I have S1, S1, I have S2, S2. and my output is due to competition. So in the on channel, it's just T1 minus T2, and this is what I get. And notice I have a Weber law here downstairs, okay? Well, how do I get an off rebound due to the phasic Q offset? Well, here, you shut off the phasic Q, so now the signals both just depend on arousal. They react quickly. But the transmitters, they're slow. They're medium-term memory. They remember their previous levels of activation. Okay, this is intracellular adaptation. It happens in photoreceptors, for example. So now I multiply S1Y when I multiply S2Y2, and the point is now the off channel is bigger, and this is how much bigger it is. Okay? Again, you have a Weber law. And moreover, if you divide the off by the on response, you find that it depends on the amount of arousal. So to design such a thing, and this is related to E. Marta's talk, you have to choose a level of arousal that's large enough to get a good enough off rebound, but not so large that you go over the inverted U. Okay. And how did I get into R's? Well, to my surprise, there was a novelty-based reset, i.e., if you have a sudden burst of arousal in response to an unexpected event, that can also disconfirm online processing. And that meant there was cognitive modulation of working memory. And so I asked, well, how can you have arousal get activated? It has to get activated by a mismatch with an expectation, and you just follow your nose. Okay, so there were many pathways to art. So how does novelty cause a rebound? So again, you calibrate to the phasic input, and you keep the phasic input on, but now suppose an unexpected event occurs and there's an arousal burst, and arousal now goes up by some increment. Well, we'll get an off reaction if the off response is bigger than the on response, and so we compute it and you get a mess. And so the question is, how do you interpret the mess? Well, let me just point out that if all you do here is take a linear signal to see the simplest case of what's going on, then your off response is going to increase with the phasic input. So that says that if I was a very active feature and I caused something bad to happen, then I have to get shut off a lot. If I wasn't an active feature, then I'd have to be shut off because I wasn't causing trouble. And I'm only going to get shut off if what happened was unexpected enough to exceed a threshold. So this then led to the idea you can have whole fields of features that are all trying to read out what they think is going on and into composite expectations, and if their collective action caused a disconfirmed result, then in parallel you could reset the whole field by a non-specific burst of arousal that doesn't know who caused the trouble. And so how do you get your inverted U? How do you get your hyperexcitability and your hypoexcitability? Well, the claim is you just look at the on response. Okay, here you have quadratics in the denominator, linear terms here. So if you increase R, you're going to go over the U. And why do you have it here? Well, if you have sigmoid signals here, you're going to have that there. And so the Weber law that's built in because you have this medium-term memory gives you these properties and helps you to explain a lot of hard data. And in fact, there are other theorists who talked about Weber law models of mental disorders, notably race, where the idea is the tonic baseline signals determine brain sensitivity to basic inputs, and low arousal can cause hyperreactive responses, high arousal, hyporeactive responses. Well, one could go on and on in this way, but I hope I've at least given you a brief introduction to some ideas about cognitive emotional learning, along the way pointing out that even this simple version of the model, and it goes in stages to more and more quantitative models, can help you to understand things which are really hard to understand without it, even such hard things as schizophrenic symptoms. Thanks for your attention. So again, then there's a break. We'll start promptly at 10:30. Let me remark too, if you're interested on Saturday night in going to Shutshine with a group of people, please sign up at the registration desk with Cindy or whoever's there, because we need a head count so the restaurant knows how many seats to reserve. And it's usually a very nice thing.